Hello, my name is Dr. Pamela Cunningham, and I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about screen time in our children, specifically the risks and benefits of our children spending time in front of a screen while they develop through their younger years, their toddler years, their elementary school years, and their adolescent years. For those of you who have never seen my videos and haven't seen my website, I'll give you just a little bit of background about myself. I am a Harvard-trained, board-certified medical doctor who was in practice for about 6.5 years. And then I decided to take some time off from my medical practice to raise my children. Some of the things that I noticed when I was in my medical practice and when I was raising my children are that there are so many potential dangers or pitfalls that have developed in today's society that can target children and lead to them basically not having the happy, healthy lives that we as parents all want for our children. So, of course, as a mother, I want my children to be the happiest, healthiest, most productive human beings that they can possibly be. And I want the things that we do for them when they're growing up to help them attain that goal of being the happy, healthy, independent, and productive citizen. And I'm sure that's what most parents want for their children. So I decided to develop this series of videos to share with other people the things that I learned during my medical practice and also during my time raising my children thus far that I have found to be potential pitfalls that are completely avoidable. And if we are able as parents to avoid these pitfalls and to keep our children from falling in them, our children should have much healthier, happier, and more productive lives. So again, today's topic is going to be screen time exposure to our children as they grow. As a medical doctor and a scientist, everything I'm going to be showing you today is going to be based on scientific data, scientific evidence. So none of this is going to be just my personal opinion. This is going to be all based on scientific evidence. And as we go through this video, I'm going to show you the actual scientific evidence so that you can know that what I'm telling you is really based in fact, and that if followed, it should really be helpful and beneficial to your children, both in the short term as young children, middle-aged children, and in the long term as adults as they go through their lives. So according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, kids age 8 to 18 years old, American children from age 8 to 18 years old, spend an average of 7.5 hours in front of a screen. That's per 24-hour day, 7.5 hours in a 24-hour day. So if you take that number and extrapolate it out or pull it out over a course of 365-day year, that means that your average American child is spending 114 days per year, 24-hour days per year, simply in front of a screen. So to many of us who hear that number, it really sounds extraordinary and frankly almost unbelievable that children are spending that much time in front of a screen. Well, the question should be asked and has been asked, is that necessarily a bad thing? You know, it's currently the year 2021, and we spend a lot of our lives on screens. A lot of us work in front of a screen. A lot of schoolwork that's assigned is assigned on computers. So is it necessarily a bad thing that our children are spending 7.5 hours per day in front of a screen? Maybe it's just the way of the world today, and it will be the way of the world in the future, and it will actually help to better prepare our children if we allow them to spend more time in front of a screen. Well, I'm here today to debunk that myth for you because it's simply not true. Again, I'm going to be showing you the scientific evidence as we go along so that you can know that everything I'm telling you is based in fact. So the first article I wanted to show you is this one here. And it's, you can see there, it's from the journal, the American Medical Association, Pediatrics, from March of 2019. And anyone can find these articles through just a simple internet search if you'd like to go back and take a look at the medical studies themselves. I usually pull these studies off a site called PubMed. It's just PUBMED, PubMed, and it's through the National Institutes of Health. Anyone can get on there. You don't have to be a medical doctor. It's, you know, free and open to the public. And the reason that I like PubMed is because everything that's on that site is a medical, scientific, peer-reviewed study. So it's not just kind of written by a fly-by-nighter. It's actually reviewed by other scientists before it gets put in any of these journals and then published to PubMed. So this particular study looked at a group of 2,441 mothers. So that's a large group of patients. 2,441 is a large group of patients in a medical study. So this would be considered, you know, a good number of people to follow and gather results and data from. So what the authors of this study did is they followed these ladies, their children, from the time the children were 24 months of age, which is 2 years of age, then again at 36 months of age, which is 3 years of age, and all the way through to when the children turn 5 years of age or 60 months of age. And what they found is that the children who were exposed to higher levels of screen time when they were 2 and 3 years old all were having poor developmental performance by the time they were 3 and 5 years old. So in other words, if the children had a lot of screen time from the ages of 2 to 3 years old, by the time they were up through to 5 years of age, they weren't developing as well as their peers. They weren't meeting the developmental milestones that the same age children who weren't in front of a screen were developing. So what does that mean, developing? What does it mean for a child to develop? Basically, when a child is developing, they're just growing appropriately as a normal, healthy human being would grow at the same rate that their peers of the same age group should be growing. So you guys have probably all been exposed to developmental checks with your children. The most common example that I can think of is all of us, when we've gone to the pediatrician's office, we're asked to fill out forms about our child's development. So questions depending on the age of your children might be, you know, is your child getting himself or herself dressed independently in the morning? Are they using utensils to eat their food? Are they able to draw circles? Are they able to follow simple 3-step commands, or depending on their age, simple 5-step commands? The reason that the pediatrician is asking you this is to make sure that your child is developing appropriately. Because if a child starts to fall off that developmental scale, that's going to lead to significant problems with their functioning, their actual human functioning, as they get older and they're supposed to be developing properly further. So a lot of these children who are starting to fall off the scale will start to have to go to things like occupational therapy, maybe physical therapy. They may have to miss school for some of these things. They may miss, you know, what would otherwise just be good family time, play time, reading time, because they are in these therapies trying to get caught back up on the developmental spectrum where they should be in the first place, but where they've unfortunately fallen off due to their exposure to screen time. So again, this shows us that in these very young children, age 2 to 3, the screen time is already damaging them and causing problems with their development. The next article that I wanted to share with you goes to a little bit older age group. This is age 3 to 4 year olds. And again, I'm showing you the article because if you want to look it up and take a look at it and read it for yourself, it is available just with a simple internet search. But this article was published in the Journal of Sports Health Sciences, March of 2019. And again, it looks at 3 to 4 year olds. And it studies children who are exposed to high amounts of screen time versus children of the same age who are instead spending their time in physical activities, things like throwing the ball outside, going to the playground and playing, on the slides and the swings, etc., playing tag with their little friends, just doing regular physical activity. And what this study showed was that the children who were the 3 to 4 year olds who were exposed to high levels of screen time were were found to have poor motor skills, motor functioning. So, what is a motor skill exactly? What is it that these children were behind on? Their motor skills basically means movement of an individual, how well an individual can move. So there are two general categories of motor skills. The first is what we usually call fine motor skills, and the second one is called gross motor skills. Fine motor skills are like little things that we can do with our hands during our day-to-day life. So examples of fine motor skills would be feeding yourself with a fork and spoon, at a very young age, coloring with a crayon, stacking blocks would be an example of motor skills. As the children get older, writing with a pen and pencil are motor skills that they need to be attaining. And you can see just with those few examples that I've given you that those are really important skills for children to be developing. Examples of gross or what they call larger motor skills would be running, jumping, hopping, throwing a ball. And these children, these 3 to 4 year old children who were exposed to large amounts of screen time were behind in their motor skills, both fine and gross. So we can see again that the screen time is really doing damage to these young children in that they're not doing as well with things like writing, with things like throwing a ball. These are very important for when they get into school and as they advance in their both academic and athletic endeavors. The next journal article I wanted to show you, we're going to keep on going here with the age groups. So this article was published in, I'm sorry, I'm going to skip back one article because we want to do elementary school before we get to adolescence. So this article is published in 2021 in BMC Public Health, the Biomed Central. And this was actually a study of elementary school students, so we're getting older. And this was a study of 7,419 elementary school age children. So this is a huge study. Over 7,400 children were looked at. And this study observed the relationship between screen time in these children and obesity, levels of physical activity, and academic performance. So what it found was a direct relationship between screen time and obesity. In other words, the more screen time these children were being exposed to, the higher the levels of obesity. This is a very significant problem. A lot of times, obesity in children is a very significant problem. A lot of times nowadays we hear the term fat shaming. We don't want to fat shame. And as a medical doctor and a mother and just a human being, I would never want to fat shame anyone or make fun of anyone because they're overweight. Frankly, most of us could lose a couple pounds, and I wouldn't be one to point a finger, and I certainly wouldn't be one to make fun of anyone. Certainly would never be one to make fun of a child because they're obese. It's an unfortunate situation when children become obese. It can have several health impacts for the children. First of all, obese children are more likely to develop diabetes. They're more likely to have problems with their joints. They're more likely to have significant emotional problems. As we know, unfortunately, some children can be cruel to others, and children who are obese are oftentimes made fun of by their peers, and this can take an emotional toll on those children. So the fact that we're putting our children at risk of obesity because of the amount of screen time that they're being exposed to, this should teach us something, that there's a problem there, that we really want to cut back on screen time. We don't want our children to be obese. Again, we want our children to be happy, healthy, and productive. And if children are in front of the screen and they're becoming obese, which again can lead to health problems, both physical and emotional, This is something we really need to take seriously. The next issue that this article points out is lower levels of physical activity. So it's not difficult to see that the more screen time a child has, the less physical activity they're going to be exposed to. And this is important because physical activity when you're young is important in terms of developing your musculoskeletal frame, both for when you're young and as we age. We want to really get those muscles and bones strong when we're young as a foundation for the rest of our lives. So children being on a screen is not healthy for them. Again, neither physically in the short term or in the long term. And then the final thing that this article demonstrated was the more screen time children have, the poorer their academic performance is. So this goes back to the question that we had asked at the very beginning of this talk. Well, maybe it's not a bad thing if children are on a screen all the time. After all, it's the way of the world, right? Well, it turns out that children being on a screen is not helpful for them academically. It's harmful for them academically. It leads to poorer academic performance. Academic performance is important for all children. There are some children who thrive uh, naturally academically. They're just really strong students. And there are some students who don't thrive as much academically. It's not their gift. They are going to be more towards the athletic side or the manual side where they make a living with their hands rather than their academics. Regardless of what your child's gifts are, academic performance is important for all of us. No matter what kind of business you go into when you're an adult, good math skills are important. The ability to read well and to process what you're reading well is important for any adult. So no matter, again, what your child's specific gifts are, academic performance is extremely important to all of us. And we don't want to compromise our child's academic performance because they're in front of a screen. The final article I wanted to share with you is this one here. And again, now we're going to be up to adolescence. This article is from March of 2018. And it was published in BMJ again, just like the last one. And this article looked at adolescents, children in their adolescence, so older children, and it looked at the relationship between screen time and obesity, depression, and quality of life. Again, what this article found was that the higher the amount of screen time these adolescents were exposed to, the higher the rate of obesity. We covered obesity a lot with the last article, so I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next finding, which was depression. The more screen time these adolescent children are exposed to, the higher the rate of depression. So for any of us who have ever either personally suffered from depression or had a loved one who suffered from depression, we know that this is not a good way to live. Being depressed in your life is a very difficult life to have. And worst case scenario can end up in suicide and early taking of one's own life from that depression. So we want to do everything we can to keep our children, again, both physically and emotionally healthy and also psychologically healthy. Why do people suffer from depression? What causes it? Depression, like almost every other disease that we know of, is a combination of your genetics and your environment. So your genetics are basically your chromosomes, your DNA, the genetic material that we each get from our mother and our father. And in some genetic lines, people are prone to depression. And then there can be something on top of that works together with the genetics and really kicks that person, unfortunately, into a state of depression. Examples of an environmental factor that might occur that leads someone to become depressed is maybe an abusive childhood or a very poor diet where they're missing essential nutrients, or screen time. What this study shows us is that screen time causes depression in adolescents. According to the Pew Research Center, in 2017, 13% of American teenagers suffered from depression. Then that's teenagers between the ages of 12 and 17. And what that translated into was 3.2 million teenagers in America suffered from depression. That number was up from 2007, only 10 years earlier. In 2007, it was 8%. In 2017, it had jumped 5% to 13%. So depression had increased significantly in only those 10 years. And now we see with everything with the COVID lockdowns and all that's been going on in our society, depression only continues to skyrocket. So again, we want to do everything we can to help with the emotional, the physical, the psychological health of our children. And keeping them off the screen is one of the things you can do to keep your children healthy and happy. The final thing that this study showed was that children who were on the screen a lot had a poorer quality of life. Again, what do any of us parents want for our children? We want them to have the best lives they possibly can. We know as adults that not every day is going to be great, and maybe not every year is even going to be great. But we want as much of our lives and as much of our children's lives to be happy and healthy as possible. And we see from this study that as we put our children on the screen, we are taking away from their quality of life. This is not what we as parents want. We as parents want our children happy. Many of us, when we think of parenting young children, we think of old movies where children are running through fields with tall grasses, with flowers, where they're swimming in streams. This is the kind of quality of life we want to encourage for our children. And not only is it a matter of quality of life, these normal childhood activities that we want to encourage in our children, but it's also a matter of their development. So what does a child learn when they're running through grasses or jumping in a stream? Well, they might learn, wow, that rock at the bottom of that stream really hurt when I landed on it. And next time I should be a little bit more careful and maybe wear water shoes. Or, ooh, that sting in the grass really hurt. You know, I need to really be careful and kind of think about what kind of organisms are in the grass with me so I can just make sure that I don't get seriously injured. They'll probably also learn, whoa, that was a great day that I got to spend playing in the stream or playing in the grass or playing baseball or doing gymnastics or whatever, performing ballet, whatever the case may be that your child is into and that your child likes. These healthy childhood activities, these are the things we want to encourage in our children so that they continue to progress in their developmental milestones, so that they develop proper motor skills, so that they stay away from unfortunate childhood illnesses like obesity, depression, and so that we optimize the quality of their life to the absolute best extent that we as parents can. So let's talk for a minute about why we as parents might choose to put our children in front of screens. And the simplest answer is that it's an easy thing for us to do. It's something that our children really think they enjoy, and it's an easy way to parent. So most of us have gone out to dinner with our families before and seen very nice looking families sitting around another dinner table, and their children are all in front of a screen watching videos or playing video games. And to me, that's a really heartbreaking thing to see. My oldest child is 10 years old already, and I already see that time goes by so quickly, and that the amount of time that my husband and I have to both enjoy our children and to teach our children about life in general is very short. It may seem, especially when your children are very young, the time may seem very long, but it's not. We have a short period of time to teach these kiddos, and we want to, both from a selfish standpoint, we want to enjoy our children, and from a parental responsibility standpoint, we have the responsibility to teach our children about the world. Even it's as simple when you go out to dinner, to put the screen away so that children can learn how to have proper dinner conversations around the dinner table so they can learn how to look at a menu and order properly. We want our children to be able to learn these things in their childhood. And when we simply put them in front of a screen, it robs them of those opportunities. And it actually robs us as parents of good time we can spend with our children. What are some possible, and I'm going to be doing a video on this shortly about alternatives to screen time for our children, for their activities. Another one of the reasons that we put our children in front of the screen is because we as parents need a break. Especially as mothers, we are oftentimes around our children from the time we wake up in the morning to the time that we go to bed completely exhausted at night. And sometimes as a parent, it's an easy break to put your child in front of a screen so that you yourself can wind down a little bit. That is unfortunately not a good choice, a good parenting choice. There are other ways for us as parents to get that break that we need. Make a plan with your neighbor across the street or next door, or a neighbor from church, or a friend from church, or a friend from work. Make an appointment with them. Have them take your kids for 2 hours a week, and you take their kids for 2 hours a week. And that way you can get the time that you need to feel like a human being. Really, 2 hours a week is perfect amount of time. That's all the time you need to replenish yourself and to feel like a normal human being again. So take advantage of your other friends or family members who have young children. Help them out and they will help you out, and you both will feel better after you've had that little break. Another opportunity to have a break and to be around other adults. Most communities have a story time. They have story time where you can bring your children to the library and the librarians read a nice story to them, and they do some artwork or they do a little activity after the story. Bring your child to library time. Make a date with a friend. Have her or him come too. And you can spend time chatting with your friend while the librarian reads to the child and while your child does whatever activity they have planned for the day, whether it's artwork or the little dance routine that they do or whatever it is. You can spend that half an hour, 45 minutes chatting with your friend and just feeling revamped and like an adult and like a normal human being. So these are just two simple ways where when we're starting to feel like we need a break, when we're starting to feel like it's too much, the children are too much for me right now. These are simple ways, simple, healthy ways for both you and your children to take a break and to get that rest that you need to feel replenished and to continue going on. But they're not just putting your child in front of a screen and doing what we can clearly see is damage to our children by putting them in front of that screen. I showed you 4 articles today about the harmful effects of screen time in children, but I could have shown you thousands of them. There are literally thousands of articles that demonstrate how harmful screen time is to the developing child, to their mind, and to their bodies. And those, again, are available to anyone who wants to research them online. But it's time for us as parents to really think about screen time and think about the harmful effects of screen time and just say no to screen time, because again, we want our children to be happy and healthy and productive members of society, and screen time is not allowing for them to develop into these little human beings. Are there ever times that screen time is appropriate? There are a few examples that I can think of. For example, sometimes a child will be given a homework assignment to do a research paper where they need to use the internet for their homework assignment. In that case, they are learning how to use the internet for research, and they are learning that the computer is a tool. It's not a toy. It's a tool. And those are two totally appropriate ways to use the internet. Another example I can think of is for those of us whose families live out of town. If grandma lives out of town and your children and and the grandmother want to have FaceTime together, that's a perfectly good use of screen time. Again, it's showing the children how to use a computer, and it's showing them that the computer should be used as a tool, that it's not their toy, that it's not their best friend, that it's not a physical activity, but that it's a tool that can be used for great purposes when used appropriately and when used very minimally. So again, I just want to encourage you to really limit the use of your children's screen time to as close to zero as possible, because in the long term, it's really going to pay off. I see my children and how well they are functioning, both in terms of their general joy with life, with their academic outcomes, with their physicality, with their health. And I'm very thankful that my husband and I early on made a decision to limit screen time to zero for our children. Has it been the easiest road to take? No, but I think it's truly been the most rewarding road. And I would encourage you as parents, whether your children are very young, whether they're elementary school or whether they're in their adolescence, please get rid of the screens. It'll be the best thing for your children in the long term. Again, my name is Dr. Pamela Cunningham. Thank you so much for joining me today for this important subject about screen time and the harmful effects it can have for our children. Please share this video with your friends or your family. The more children that we have developing into healthy, happy children, the better our society will be for everybody. So it's a really important topic. Please share it, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have a lot of videos about methods that we can all use to keep our children happy and healthy and help them to grow into the most productive children and adults they can possibly be. Thank you again so much for joining me, and you have a great day.